I know how frustrated and how downright resentful I had become of my sewing machine.
Welcome to Make and Decorate, a podcast for makers who love to sew, quilt, and decorate. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Make and Decorate, episode 29. So we are again in a new month. Happy June. And I hope that the weather is tapering down from its turbulent spring storms, tornadoes, flooding, everything. It's just been really crazy. But summer is upon us, and we're in the season of graduations, students and teachers getting out for summer break. Vacations are going to be starting, and we're all going to head outdoors for the summer activities for everyone here in the Northern Hemisphere. And I finally got flowers last weekend. They're not planted yet because we've been having so much rain, but I'm excited about that to get those going. And what else is going on here? Okay, so entering June, I made a to-make list for June. And I've got to make some stuff for my road trip coming up in July. And I want to make, of course, my list is like completely over ambitious, and I know I'm not going to get it all done. So then from that list, I narrowed it down to my top 3. And if I get those done, great. Then I can work on maybe something else on the list. The top thing is knit pajamas for myself. And I just got the fabric today. It's really cool. It's Caterina Roccella, and it's called Pixel Fly Eden Knit in lavender, and it's by Art Gallery Fabrics. It's really pretty. It's got like a lavender background, and then it has sketched flowers in, black outline, and they're all filled in with just white. And then butterflies are placed here and there on the flowers, and the butterflies are in full color. It's really beautiful. I love it. And I just pre-washed it. It's in the dryer. So because it's just crazy. The ready-made pajamas are just either they don't pre-shrink or the fabric is too inexpensive and the quality is poor. But it just, it starts off at the right length, and then after you wash it once or twice or, 3 times, it just keeps shrinking, and then the pant legs are like all the way above your ankles. And it just drives me bananas. So I'm making my own pajamas. And I've made pajama pants before, but I'm making the full set. So like the top and the bottoms. And it's a 5 out of 4 pattern. And it's called the Molly pajamas. So that'll be the first time I make that pattern. And what I like about this pattern, because I've read through the entire pattern, and it looks easy enough. I'll probably use my serger for a lot of it. But I like how they break down the yardage so that you can make it interesting by using contrast fabrics if you want, or for instance, if the collar, the neckband, if you wanted to do that in a different fabric, they give you a little yardage, like a quarter of a yard. And they give separate yardage for the sleeves if you want those different, and the body of the top. So I really like that because I don't have to try to guess and figure out what that's going to be. So I'm looking forward to that. And the other thing I want to make is a dog bed for my Cooper. And he's got plenty of dog beds here, but I want it to fit in the car in the back seat because he's coming with us on our road trip. He's such a good travel dog. Ever since we had him, we've had him he's 4 years old now, and we got him when he was 12 weeks old. And he's loved the car, and we take him everywhere. We take him as many places as we can. and he loves it. And he's really good. He went through 3 obedience classes, so he's very well behaved. And yeah, so I found a really cool Airbnb that accepts dogs. And so I'm going to make a bed that will fit. It's a rectangle shape. And I've made this before, this kind of dog bed. It's really easy. The third thing is a yarn minder bag. And this pattern is by So Sweetness. It is a tall cylinder-shaped bag made out of fabric, and there's an option where you can put 4 grommets on the top, and it's a zipper top lid, and you could put grommets so that you can pull the yarn through them and crochet or knit right from there, which is really cool. And then, of course, there's pockets on the outside for storage for your tools like crochet hooks or knitting needles. And so, yeah, I've got to have that done if I want to bring all this yarn with me to try to make those hexies for the hexagon Afghan. So those are my top 3. So let's hope I get those done, and I only have a month to get them done. All right, so those are my projects for June. All right, and then this is just my little reminder for everyone to, if you haven't already, to subscribe, rate, review if you have iTunes, or if another platform allows you to rate and review the podcast. I would be very appreciative for that. And now, let's get into my chat with Leah Day. Leah Day is a quilter. She's a pattern designer, an author, a teacher, and a business owner. So we have a really great conversation on all of those topics and what's coming up for her in the upcoming months. I'm so excited to welcome Leah Day. Hello, my quilting friends.
Hello,
to my podcast today. Yay!
Hello, my quilting friends.
Welcome, my quilting friend Leah. Woohoo! I am so excited you're here. So, Leah, I think every time I can't assume that everybody knows who you are. So I am going to have you share your story of just when did you first recognize your creative side, and not just with sewing and quilting, but I think that sewing and quilting comes from any creative activity that we've done that led us to that point. So what was yours?
Well, I grew up creating, and I was the kid that had a really messy desk in school. I was always cutting up paper and playing. It's just, for me, it was just a natural thing to always have my hands busy and to be fiddling with stuff. And I was the youngest, and so if I could kind of find myself a corner and be playing with something, then I would get in less trouble for all of those reasons. And then, I didn't have access to fabric, but what access I did have, I learned how to sew at a very early age. What I mostly did when I was really little was I folded paper and did origami. And I learned that from a woman at my church, and she taught me how to make a very basic origami box. And that was actually my first business, was in first grade. And I made up some boxes and I just had them on my desk, and some kids wanted them. And so I started selling boxes for like 5-10 cents a piece. And that doesn't seem like a very big thing, but that changed my life in a lot of ways. I sold those boxes, and I can remember the day that I opened up my Hello Kitty pencil box, and I had enough change, and it was like nickels and dimes, all, it was very small change. But I added it all up, and I had enough for pizza and ice cream. And I was a kid that carried my lunchbox every day. That was a very, very, very big deal. I cannot say how big of a deal. I was like, oh my gosh, I could buy lunch, and from that age, from like 6 or 7, I was like, I want to make stuff and sell it. And so it was, already at that time, I'm, creating something, I'm making something, but then I want to either give it as a gift, or I want to sell it, or, it was always kind of going in that direction then from a very early age.
Oh, wow. That's really great. Talk about then getting older and how you started, leading up to Leah Day Quilting.
Yeah.
How did that even happen?
So, it's easy to say that it was like, from first grade, I built this, and that's not true at all. I mean, the number of times that I've been told there's no money in this, or, you can't do it that way, or, you're not going to be able to make a living. I can't count the number of times I've heard that. I did everything the normal way. I went to high school. I went to college. I was pursuing a degree in biology, and I reached about the second. Oh, technically I was a sophomore, but I was starting my third year of college. I had met my future husband. We were dating, and he had already graduated, and I was seeing his life. We were living together in a small apartment, and Josh was, being able to like sleep till like 8 o'clock in the morning and then get up and work on the computer. And he was working from our apartment. And I was so jealous of that. And then I was also going to school and doing these super long labs with biology, and just going, I don't want to do this. I really, really don't want to do this. I don't need this degree. And I was really frustrated and kind of upset about that, and finally got honest with myself and said, I want to do the crafts that I, have been doing my whole life. And for like the chunk of middle school to high school, I'd really focused in on beadwork, and specifically seed beadwork, which is the itsy bitsy tiny little beads. And as soon as I got to college, that wasn't really working for me anymore, and I'd really transitioned over to sewing. I really wanted to learn how to quilt, but I did not manage to figure that whole 9 yards out until Josh and I were getting married. And then I wanted a double wedding ring. I was like, I want a double wedding ring. We're getting married. I've got to have a double wedding ring for my bed. And of course, I got started with like leftover fabric from my wedding dress, which is the worst kind of fabric ever to try and make a double wedding ring out of. Yeah, that ended up in the trash. It did not work out. But, it got me into quilting. I joined a guild. I started learning. I started taking workshops. I started from absolute ground zero. And I finally understood, wow, here's a craft that I can't learn from a book. I taught myself how to knit, how to crochet, how to do beadwork. All of that I learned from books that I got usually at, Goodwill and kind of thrift stores and stuff like that. Usually they were the books that were outdated information. I didn't know that at the time. They were outdated information, so people weren't getting rid of them. Most of my quilting books still had cutting things out with templates. And this was the day of, rotary cutters had already become a thing. So finally, right before our wedding, I got a new rotary cutter, and I was like, I'm going to learn this. I had a mat that was about this big. It was like 18 inches by 6 inches wide. It was the world's tiniest cutting mat. But it got me into it. It got me started quilting. And from the beginning, I knew I wanted to turn that into a business. I wanted to figure out some way of making a living with it. Now, what that was and what that would eventually become, I had no idea in the beginning, no earthly clue. And I have journal, I've been going back and kind of rereading back through old journals and stuff. And I'm finding, kind of the documented process. I'm like, I want to do this thing, but I don't know how. I'm struggling with that a lot. But it was good, because asking that question over and over and over again, eventually I found the answer. And I found it while I was working on a really important quilt. And that was Release Your Light. And this is a massive goddess quilt. And that quilt was, kind of inspired by that idea of tapping into creative energy and releasing it with the world. And while I was working on it, I hit kind of a design rut. I was quilting stippling, which is a very traditional free motion quilting filler design. And I was quilting at a very dense scale to make it micro stippling. And I was bored to tears with stippling. I had learned one other design, and that was McTavishing, and I had stitched it to death and back again, and I was bored to tears with it too. And then I was reaching a point where I was like, I feel like I need more designs, and I felt like I need to change this up. And I knew two other designs. I knew Pebbling and Paisley, but they didn't really fit design-wise. These were kind of curvy shapes, and this was a flaming quilt. It needed to be on fire. So I was whining about this to a friend, and she was like, well, why don't you just take that Paisley design and change it into a flame shape? And I remember looking at her going, is that allowed? Am I allowed to do that? And she's like, looked at me like I had two heads. Of course it's allowed, Leah. So I changed up that design. I turned it into what I call flame stitch now, stitched on the quilt, finished it up. And throughout that entire ending process, and that was not a short process, it was at least another month of quilting, and then I painted the entire surface of that quilt. So it was a long time of tedious, meticulous work left to go. But throughout that entire time, I thought about that design, and I thought about how easy it was to create. And I thought about, wow, it created a totally different texture, and I really needed that, and I really liked that. And I'm curious now. I want to know how many other designs and textures I can create. I don't know if anybody else is interested in that. I have no idea if that's even a thing, but why don't I just try it? And so the idea for challenging myself to create 365 new free machine quilting designs, that's where it came from. Because it wasn't just like, oh, I want to make 5 or I want to make 10. It was a challenge. I was like, I want to challenge myself to come up with as many as I possibly can. Josh and I had gotten married, and we had a baby, and James was 18 months old at the time. And of course, in that state of kind of being a new mom and very young, I look back on it now, I'm like, oh my God, I was so young. I was 24 years old, 25 years old. I just wanted the excuse to quilt all day. And it was so hard to make that happen, with everything that was going on. It was like, feed the baby and then play with the baby. And then, oh, it's time for a nap. But then, I was like, okay, I need to go check my email or something. I was making excuses not to quilt instead of doing the thing that I wanted to do most. And so I thought having this challenge would really force me to get serious about this and to quilt every single day and to scratch those design itches. And it did all of that and more. And it also built my business. So I started the blog, the Free Motion Quilting Project. I started sharing new designs. I stayed with sharing a design every single day for the first 80 days. And then I kind of hit a cliff of, oh my gosh, this is so much work. I can't do it. Because in addition to that, as soon as I started the blog, it was around on day 14 or so, people started asking for books. They started asking for DVDs. They didn't want to just have it online. They wanted to have it in their homes. And so, all of a sudden, in a matter of a very short space of time, I had demand for products, and I had demand for a business that didn't exist yet, and I had to build it in a very short space of time. And also my husband was we were already looking at his job and going, okay, that's probably not going to last, because it was 2009 and the recession and the whole 9 yards. So it was almost immediately, we need to build this as fast as possible so it will support us. And that was a massive amount of pressure to put on anything, and especially with a young child too. I kind of feel bad about that, but on the other side of it, it's like, you do what you do, you have to respond to the pressures of your life and do the best that you can. And so we built a business together, and Josh came on board in 2010. And he is my wingman and just about everything. He does all of the customer service, the order fulfillment through leahday.com. That's my website. So he answers questions, and he packs the orders, and he does all of the shipping. He does a lot of website maintenance and that kind of stuff. And then he edits a good number of my videos. So it's kind of...
I love that.
Yeah. Nice. So it's kind of a partnership there. And then my dad came on and started working for us in 2014. And he does all fabric preparation. So I am still in that, I am very picky. My fabric has to be washed and starched and pressed before I cut it out and make a quilt out of it. And so that is Dad. Yeah, that
wow.
You're producing enough that it actually is worth, paying someone to handle that whole beginning side of it. And then Dad also does digitizing and some computer work as far as Illustrator and stuff, designing and drawing and stuff for me too.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Wow. This is, I've heard you, on other podcasts and do your story, but I don't think I ever knew that your business really came about through this 365-day new quilting designs.
Oh, yeah.
And just from your blog.
Yeah. It was I had wanted to be like maybe a traveling teaching kind of lecturer. That was my initial idea. And I had, I think, 3 nice quilts at the time, like, oh, look at this. I made a whole cloth. I put a ribbon or two with it. I'd made this big goddess quilt that was really impressive, but I didn't have very much more. I didn't have a body of work really, and no one knew my name at all. Like, I was just this young chick that was going, hey, can you like have me come and speak for your guild and pay me? And they were like, no, little girl, we really don't want you to come, like make more quilts and be more impressive. And so, it was really funny. Once I got started with the Free Motion Quilting Project and I started sharing videos, all of a sudden the demand rushed in. All of a sudden people were, emailing me. I remember that first month I had a query from Jamaica, which was so amazing. It was like, of course you want me to go to Jamaica. I didn't end up going because almost as soon as that happened, I realized, wait a minute, I need to stay home. I've got to make these videos. This is an enormous amount of work. And, I think I started the project with 7 designs. And I quickly realized I need to be working a lot further ahead, as in months, if not, I really wish I'd started with all 365 done. I did not by a long shot. And so, getting started with, it was a scramble. It was a struggle, and lot of long working days just to kind of catch up and get a base under my feet. And then, like I said, the demand, where is the book? Where is the DVD? You don't want to tell somebody, you need to wait a year for that. You want to kind of give them something at the very beginning. So almost immediately I started working on my first book and my first DVD and that kind of stuff. And, so we made it work and did the best we could. And then from there, I pretty much decided to stick with self-publishing and I kind of discontinued those very first products within that first year. And wrote my first kind of official book, and you can still find it on Amazon, and that is Free Motion Quilting from Daisy to Paisley, and wrote that the following summer. And that's when I started really focusing in on free motion quilting fillers became kind of my main thing. And that was absolutely straight up from the Free Motion Quilting Project.
Oh, was your very first quilt a double wedding ring? Is that what you said? Oh, okay.
I pieced it. I did. I pieced 4 rings of a double wedding ring, and then that was it.
Oh, okay.
It ended up in the trash. Yeah, that was it. My
All right.
Finished quilt was a 9-patch.
Oh, cool. All right. That was my first quilt too, a 9-patch.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. So then that's great. And I think it's wonderful that you, have the work environment that you do, and you and your husband work well together, and now your dad's joined the business. And I just, I feel like, listening to your podcast too, and you talk about your day in and day out with that working environment, and it seems like, it really fulfills you. And that's what's the most important thing, I think, about running a business for yourself is, some people just want to like shoot up to this stardom and be famous or whatever. That's not me, but my whole thing more is like, I need to be fulfilled. I need to be challenged and creative. And I am that introvert like you. So that's why I like to do the YouTube videos too.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. And this is, something that someone that isn't a professional might not be aware of. And that is in quilting, the quilting industry is so huge, and there are so many things that you can do with it, and there are so many things that you can get on the road, and you can be on the road every single week if you're successful and build a brand and a name for yourself. You can be on the road and traveling all over the world every single week of the year, and it will chew you up and spit you out very quickly. And I have seen it happen, and it's very sad because you've got to know how to say no. And you've got to know what your limits are. And I didn't know that at the beginning. The first several years of my business were spent, hey, let's try this. Oh, did that work? Not really. Oh, let's try this. Oh, did that work? Not really. Or, hey, let's try this. And we went from there. And it was all a matter of learning and experiencing. And no, you can't know what's for you. His quilt market's successful. I don't know. You got to kind of try it out and see if it works for you. And then take that experience and say, okay, here's what I experienced. We lost a lot of money, or here's this experience. We made a lot of money. and go from there. There's no single plan, but I can definitely tell you, for me at least, if I got on the road and started traveling and teaching every single week, I would not be a happy camper. It would not.
Me neither. Yeah, I'm with you.
It would not make me feel fulfilled. Although I do absolutely love getting in front of people. I absolutely love lecturing. I mean, it does give me that boost that I do occasionally need. Sometimes when I'm working alone and filming alone, and kind of stuck in my own kind of groove for too long, I do get down. And a lot of that is just, I need that kind of energy boost of something exciting. And that's a large reason why I started my podcast, Hello, My Quilting Friends. And that was, I was feeling lonely. I was feeling really lonely. I was wanting an excuse to start conversations with people where it was like, I'm curious about this person. I really want to get to know them better. I really want to become their friend. But it's kind of hard when you're an adult to be like, hey, can we be friends? And I'm not.
I know.
Paper, or like, the ugly girl at the prom or something like that. Who wants to be friends with her? And so making the podcast was one of the best things I did. I started that in 2016. I'm so happy that I did, because it totally cured me of feeling lonely. I have something I can share and put out, and I shoot a little introduction and share what's going on around the house. And I'm usually doing something actively. Like 2 weeks ago, I was painting my rabbit hutch. So I'm actively outside doing something in the yard. And it's great. It makes me feel like I'm sharing my real life, not just the pretty perfect image that is so easy. And at this point, very easy for me to portray. There is a messy behind the scenes that I think is so much more interesting and should be shared too. I can make it look perfect, or I can show you the reality. And so I like both. Yeah. I
appreciate that about your podcast, and you do your podcast via video as well, so we can actually see. I remember this one podcast you did not too long ago where you were actually like working on drafting some sort of a pattern onto freezer paper or something, or trace paper. But yeah, so that was cool. I always enjoy watching and listening to your podcast.
It's always something different every week.
Yes, absolutely. So let's move on to machine quilting. You already talked about how you learned. On that, how long did it take you to notice a marked improvement in your skills? Because I think not only me, but a lot of people are interested in this and are insecure about their own progress in machine quilting. And sometimes it stops them from even doing it and enjoying it.
Yeah. Well, perspective of time. The first thing is to quilt all of your own quilts, because that's the major reason why the skill isn't being built. Because if you are piecing lots of quilts, then your piecing skill is improving with each quilt. Okay. So let's kind of think of scales. I'm a Libra, so the scales kind of are always coming to mind. So if you increase your piecing skills and piece lots of quilts, then obviously that scale is going to be so much higher. And that, if you want to think of video games, then your piecing meter is really high, but your quilting meter is super, super low. If you quilt all of the quilts that you piece, then obviously you are gaining that much more skill with every single quilt that you make, and you take all the way to completion all by yourself. And I don't care what style of quilting you're doing, and that could be hand quilting, walking foot quilting, free motion quilting, ruler foot quilting, all with the home sewing machine. You have so many different things that you can do with the home sewing machine. All of it's good. I used to be really stuck up about walking foot quilting and kind of, why would I want to mess with that? It's so slow. And it took me years and listening to my, beginner quilters that were getting started. And I was saying, let's just free motion quilt in the ditch. And they were like, that's really hard, Leah. I don't want to do it that way. And they were basically anarching. they were saying, not doing it, grabbing my walking foot. You can't tell me what to do. And so finally I looked at it and said, okay, fine, I'll try walking foot quilting too. Grab my walking foot, put it on. I was like, yeah, you know what? Actually, they're right. This is so much easier. And so that forced me to stop being stuck up about it. I then ended up writing a whole book on walking foot quilting because it made me curious about that style and really dig into it and learn more about it. So I'd say, don't get a chip on your shoulder about anything. Keep your world as open as possible. Any style goes and any machine goes, which means don't also get hung up about long arm quilting, because that's easy to do too. For a long time, I just shut the door on long arm quilting. I just decided I can't afford that. I don't have space for it. You know, the list was endless. And so rather than get curious about it and allow myself to be curious about it, I just slammed the door shut on it and said, that's not for me. And that's really unfortunate, because then what I ended up happening is I got really frustrated, and every quilt took a million years to finish. And I was quilting everything to death with one single style of quilting, you know, like basically, you know, super puffy trapunto and then really dense filler designs, and everything took years. I was completing maybe one quilt a year through pretty much 2009 to 2013-ish, maybe even longer. It was taking me a very, very long time to make anything. And you know, and like it was entirely down to that opinion, that kind of stuck up mentality. And finally I got, you know, kind of got over myself and said, you're allowed to be curious about this. And then I also had some advice from some other professional quilters. They said, look, you know, we know this quilter and that quilter, and they stayed on home sewing machines their entire career, and now they're in their 60s and their back is shot or their shoulders are shot, you know, and that this could actually be impacting your health. And I had been struggling with some really bad, intense headaches for a couple years there, and finally said, you know, wow, here's a, you know, real world experience. This could actually be having a detrimental effect on my life and my livelihood, and I need to change. I really do need to change this up. So from there, you know, started researching long arms. I rented time on a long arm at my local quilt shop, and that answered a lot of questions for me. It helped me finish some quilts on a deadline that I had to get done with. And all of a sudden I connected, wow, I can put a quilt on a long arm and have it done in a day. Actually, more than that, I can put a quilt on a long arm, I can finish it in an hour.
Wow.
That was a level of speed that I had never seen before, never touched, never had any capacity to understand before I started getting into that. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, this isn't a level playing field. So as far as the skill goes, as far as how much time it takes to build it, if you quilt your own quilts, I'd say within 5 quilts, you're going to be seeing a marked improvement in your piecing. You're going to see a marked improvement in your quilting. How long it takes to quilt those quilts is entirely down to the style of quilting that you're doing and the machine and how that machine's set up. So, you know, my first 5 quilts, that took 3 years to make 5 quilts. So it could take 3 years. It could take 10 years. It could take 1 month. It really depends on what you're using and how you're doing it and how you're putting it together. Now, I would say quilting daily will dramatically improve your quilting skill in very short order. Once I started the free motion quilting project, I noticed just a change in my free motion quilting ability around day 45. And I mean, understand that I was shooting ahead. I was stitching out and stuff behind the scenes. So it wasn't like 45 days, boom. It was more like quilting long hours for, 30 to 40 days or so, and getting so much more time in on my machine. But that was when I noticed, I started the project and I had been struggling to travel stitch consistently. I'd been struggling to form certain shapes consistently. Day 45, all of a sudden the design that I'd struggled with at the beginning was easy. And I remember that. I remember being like, oh, I wonder if I should try that paisley design again. I haven't tried that. I was really bad at it back in August, and it was, October. And so I sat down and gave it a try, and all of a sudden it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And I had no issue with stitching it. And that was when I was like, wow, this has improved my skill. This has dramatically improved my skill. So I'd say quilt everything you piece. And, if you're feeling anxious about quilting your own quilts and putting those ugly, and it's going to be ugly. I'm sorry. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's going to be ugly. We all have ugly stitches at the beginning. If you are uncomfortable about that, here's my advice. Quilt on practice sandwiches, quilt on small squares, quilt on a small scale. And that might not be your style. That might not be what you want to do. But if you quilt on an 1/8 inch scale in a 4-inch square of fabric, you're going to get so many more repetitions within that space than you would if you quilted on a bigger scale. You're going to use up and you're going to run through so much more fabric. So it might not be what you want to quilt necessarily, but you'll get more bang for your buck.
And it's helping to increase and improve your memory.
Exactly.
Of those patterns that you're trying to do.
All of these designs are created by memorization. So it's like how you write your name in cursive, how all those letters connect. It's the same thing for free motion quilting design. So I can break down every single design I've created into a simple set of rules. So for example, flame stitch. You stitch a flame shape, you travel stitch over a short distance. That sets the scale of the design. So if you're wanting it to be soft, then you stitch over a half of an inch. And then you wiggle up and do an echo. An echo is an evenly spaced line from the starting line to the next line. So it's another flame shape around it, travel stitch over, and keep repeating that. Then you branch off in another direction and you repeat that same shape again. So it's like a cluster effect. So that's just rules for one single design. Every single design has a different set of rules, and it creates a different texture.
Wow, this is so helpful because I think what I'm going to take from this is your advice on quilting at small scale, because I love those large, swirly, and then I run out of my quilt sandwich so fast. And you're right. And I've done 5 swirls.
Yeah, you get 5 swirls in and it's done. I mean, yeah, and sure, you can use that. I mean, you can use that square in more places. You could put them together and make a bed quilt out of it or something like that. But if you instead like make a set of coasters and they're all quilted on an 1/8 inch scale, then you've just gotten the same amount of quilting in a smaller amount of space. And it's probably going to take time, but it's not going to take anything like the amount of time to push a quilt under your needle, right?
Right.
Getting more fine-tuned control.
And then, so then when you practice on that smaller scale, when you want to increase it to a larger scale, do you find it that relates? Like you could easily do that, or
it's the same.
Or are you going to be too used to doing the tiny scale?
I mean, it depends on, I don't think it's that big of a deal, personally.
Okay.
I really feel like one thing translates to another. I mean, initially you're aiming for memorization. You're learning design. You're aiming to build the skill to echo consistently and to travel stitch consistently. Those skills translate no matter how big or how small it is. As far as the scale, all you're doing is you're basically increasing the space between the lines of quilting. So if I can stitch a spiral and it can be a 1 inch spiral, I can stitch that exact same spiral and it can be a 5 inch spiral. Now, the only thing that's really dramatically different on a home machine is when you quilt big, you have to have your hands further apart and you're making more of an arm movement instead of a fingertip movement. And that, can be a difference. And if you're on a big, giant, bulky quilt, so the difference between a 4 inch square and a king size quilt is pretty dramatic, right? You're going to have bulk, you're going to have weight, you're going to have all that stuff kind of pulling against you. So you've got to take that into account too. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck in a 4 inch square. Is that going to be perfect? If you want to go quilt a king, no, but it's going to give you a lot. And it's not going to waste nearly as much fabric. That's cheaper.
This is awesome. That's great. I love this. I have to say, when I saw you all of a sudden long arm quilting, I was like in a state of shock. I'm like, wait, no, this is my Leah Day, queen of machine quilting.
That is too funny. Yeah. And I can kind of a comment like, oh, you along the lines of you sold out.
You sold out.
Yeah, sold out. And I mean, and you know what? Hey, I'll take it. I will absolutely take it. And it makes me smile actually, because I know how frustrated and how downright resentful I had become of my sewing machine. I mean, it was to that degree of unhappiness. And when you reach that point where the craft that you love is now becoming something that you hate, you've got to change. And I will absolutely raise my hand and say, sure, sold out. I'm a long arm dealer now. I mean, I not only, do long arm quilting, I sell the machines because of this, because I feel like this is so important. And I've almost become a long arm evangelist because I think that it's one of those things that we have to say, enough's enough. I've reached a point where this is no longer fun and I want to make it fun again. And I want to make my quilts faster. I want to make them softer. I want to make quilts for the couch or quilts for the bed that aren't stitched to death and back again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the other thing that I think is important to point out, and that is dense quilting is easier on a whole machine because it's a smaller movement. It's a finer movement. So it's really easy to quilt dense on a whole machine. It's harder to do that on a long arm and have the same level of control. It's easier to make big sweeping movements on a long arm. It's easier to quilt big, giant, chunky fills. It just depends on the size of your long arm with what you can do. But, I don't mind that at all, not one bit. And I know for some people that probably kind of turns them off from my channel now, and that's okay. I'm not for everybody. No one is for everybody. I mean, you can try and be the every woman for everything, and it's not going to work. You've got to pick a niche, go after that niche, and do your thing and do what you love. What I found, and this was really interesting, it was not a pleasant experience, but at the same time, it definitely kind of, you need these wake up calls. And I had a big wake up call this last fall. I went to a quilt festival. This was the first time I ever attended. And I was there hanging out with Grace Company in their booth and doing some demos and stuff. And people started coming up to me and saying hi and, oh my gosh, you're Leah Day and that kind of stuff. But then they would start talking about me in past tense. They would say, oh, I used to follow your channel. Oh, I used to watch your videos. Oh, I used to enjoy the Free Motion Quilting Project. And they said this enough, and it was enough different people that I was like, I'm starting to pick up a trend here. I don't really realize was that I helped people through a certain stage in their quilting, and then they grew past me. They grew past what I was sharing.
Oh, okay.
And they moved on, and I stuck staying and doing the same thing. And that's the thing about growth, is that we're constantly growing and changing and becoming better quilters. And I had kind of gotten into this niche of sharing beginner information, and that's not a bad thing. That's where the bulk of, new quilters are, and that's a great place to be. But the downside is a lot of people were enjoying my work and then going away and not coming back for more. So I really feel like getting into long arm quilting and sharing these new tutorials and innovating in this way has been very, very good for me. And I'm very happy to be doing it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I did go to Quilt Festival what was it, in end of March here in Chicago, and that's like the last time they're going to be here. I was so sad, but I did stop by the Grace booth, and they let me try out their long arm. I've gotten a nice, like, every time I go to these quilt shows, I try out all the different long arms. I've sat down at the mid arms, or the sit down ones, and tried them out, and I definitely love the feel of the long arm machines. I just, I know some people, it's not for them, and that's based on personal preference.
Yeah.
But I can't wait. I look forward to the day that I can get a long arm, and that's why I love watching your videos on it. It's wonderful. But if listeners go to quilt shows, try out the long arms. Don't be shy, because those companies are really generous, and they offer you whatever you want to do on their machines, and they're all different, and you gotta just don't be afraid. I mean, I made some wobbly paisleys and everything, but I didn't care. I'm just like, I just want to feel this machine, and I want to, just experience it and just make sure that this is still like what I want. And it was. So, yeah.
And that's the thing. It's, I go to shows and stuff and just check things out. And it took me several shows. And I met Grace Company finally at Quilt Market, and it's where they were set up, and was able to demo and stuff. And I think that you just have to find the right fit and find a good dealer. That's very, very important. And the key is being able to try out the machine and play with it. And I've gone to shows where the kind of the person manning the booth is reading a magazine and not eager to help. And I mean, that might not be the best choice. So it's looking at the information, and then also before you buy something, research online and make sure that video, that machine or that long arm company is supported with video, because I've just recently started sharing videos on our new Q-Zone hoop frame, which is a very small frame. It only takes up about 4.5 feet, and there's been other hoop frames that have come out in the past and they had very little video on them,
Mm.
very little support. I mean, there's out there, but it's not a lot. Nothing like, free motion quilting on a home machine. That area, that arena is kind of flooded at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And, so to me, sharing videos on this little Q zone has been a lot of fun because it's a kind of an open playing field. There's not a lot of videos on it, and I'm having so much fun because it's challenging. It's a different type of frame. It's a different type of, it's kind of a different build. I put a home sewing machine on it. So I was quilting on a home sewing machine, but moving it on the frame. So that was really, really interesting, and it was a challenge. It was hard. And I had to think about things a lot more than I usually have to, but I was still able to quilt an entire baby quilt doing it. So,
oh, I love it. Yeah, I saw that frame there at the quilt show. It was interesting. Yeah, it's definitely totally different because you don't roll it on the rollers,
yes,
and pin it and stuff like that. It's just kind of like
it's hoop
held into place in a hoop, like a super large embroidery hoop.
Exactly. And you gotta have to think about it that way. And for that reason, it's not going to work the same as a 3-rail frame. You're gonna have to do a little bit of pinning and basting off the frame. But I've been playing around with ways of making that easier, and that's a wonderful thing that I really, really love about this is being able to investigate, try new things, learn more. I think it's so easy to get kind of stuck in a rut of doing the same thing over and over and over again, and this is just so different.
I love it. Yeah, that's cool, and that's great that you're doing videos on it. So. Let's see what else. Oh, you know what? We have to talk about your goddess quilts.
Yes, I am working on a book right now with this series.
Yes, you are.
I am. And this book has been more than 10 years in the making. And it is an incredible body of work. And I have had this book on my list for years. For years and years and years, I've said, oh, I want to write this goddess book. And I kept putting it off, and I kept putting it off, and I kept putting it off. And finally, this past winter, I sat down and wrote basically kind of a memoir. It was just kind of a series of stories and a collection of stories about the last year. And I didn't end up publishing it because in the process of writing that book, and I don't regret, setting down and writing a book in 5 days and doing all that work, because in the process of writing that book, I realized, what, the book that's actually on my mind, that has been in my heart, is this goddess quilt book, and I have got to do it because if I don't, one day it's going to be too late. One day I'm going to miss this opportunity. And also the length of time. I mean, the first quilt in the series I finished it before my son was born, and he's 12. So it's like 12 and a half years ago. I was forgetting things. I was losing my memory on some of the stuff. And then, it kind of started me on this whole track of going back through my blog and rereading old blog posts and going page after page after page. And gosh, I mean, it's kind of mind blowing how much things have changed, and each goddess quilt has a different story. There's kind of a different theme behind them. Some of these quilts have, and they're all very personal. Some of these quilts were about, just like Release Your Light. It was about wanting to share my creative energy with the world. One quilt, Hot Cast, was about, wanting to learn how to love myself and to let go of a lot of the negativity and kind of my inner negative voice, which I did a whole other quilt about called Shadow Self. So I've worked through these issues and shared about it and been very, very public about it. And that's something that kind of, again, I could put an image of myself out there that's very, here's all my highlights, here's my best, or I can be real. And I have always erred to the side of being real and sharing my honest truth. And I didn't have a perfect childhood, and I'm not a perfect person. I've shared honestly, I stopped drinking in 2017, and that was a major pivotal moment for me. It was January 2017. I'm never going to drink again. And that was huge. So all that's going in this book, and I'm super excited about it because I've never read a book like this. I never expected to be writing a book like this. I can tell you why I kept putting it off, and that's because it's hard. It's really hard to write this. It's really hard to go back through and see the mistakes I've made and see the quilts that bogged down for years. Like there have been some quilts in this series that took 4 or 5 years to finish. And there have been some quilts in the series that one of them I burned. I was just said, I don't want it anymore. I'm going to burn it. And, so being able to tell all these stories has been so amazing. And I realized, I've never found a book like this, but this is the book I've always wanted to find. So I'm going to write it. And I'm so happy about it.
And it's so, very personal and intimate. I feel that you're sharing that with us. And just the goddess quilt. Now, is that something that you invented, like you created? It's not like an already developed like technique or something. It's your, is it your thing?
Well, if you think about it, this is eternal. I mean, we have been drawing pictures of the female shape since the beginning of time. These quilts are personal to me in the sense of they're kind of almost self-portraits. They capture either where I am at a specific time or who I want to be. And they're not like a photograph of me. They're very stylized. They're my style, and very symbolic too. As far as other people doing quilts like this, I haven't seen that many, and certainly not a series like this.
I haven't either.
But I mean, it's totally cool. I mean, everybody can make goddess quilts. Like I said, it is an ancient symbol, and so
okay, that's what I wanted to know. What is the origin of that?
For me, it's just
that makes sense.
Like my first one was I was pregnant with my son, and I wanted a symbol of a powerful female figure that would carry me through the birth of my son, and I made that. And I didn't actually originally call them goddesses. That was something somebody, a lot of commenters and stuff online was like, oh, tell me about your goddess quilts. And I was kind of like, I felt a little squishy about that term for a long time. I was like, they're powerful women, something like that. I wanted to call them something else. But goddess it just ended up being an easier term that was more understandable. And then now these days I own it. And I can say, This is an impressive series. These are beautiful quilts. And in that, in the way that they helped change my life, they are goddesses in their own way. So, and it doesn't mean anything religious is, I guess, another thing I should preface too.
Sure. Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm really interested in it, so I can't wait for your book to come out. And speaking of books, you've really become an author. I mean, you love writing.
I really do. And this is the thing, I kind of finally really started to own that in 2017. I wrote a new book that's Explore Walking Foot Quilting with Leah Day, and self-published that. And that was when I kind of turned a corner and said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn the whole process. I'm going to start laying out my books. I'm going to start doing my own photography. So I bought a DSLR camera and started shooting my own photos and shooting in progress shots on my machine. That book, I did pay a layout artist, and I realized during that process, I can probably do this myself too. And it takes more time to wear all the hats. It takes a lot more time.
Sure does.
So much more control that you can have of the process. And instead of having someone else produce the files and have errors with the printer, and that take days and days and days and end up costing me thousands of dollars in shipping costs, I can control that, and that level of control is something I really, really need. I am kind of a control freak. I will be completely
That's so funny.
I went from there, and I had a book idea that was really in my heart from the time that my son was like in kindergarten. I was walking a lot at the time. I'd drop him off at the bus stop, and then I'd walk around the mall, and idea kind of popped into my head about a little girl, and she was learning how to quilt, and she, had this amazing grandmother who was teaching her, and then there was this whole fantasy element to it where maybe she goes inside of a quilt and has this adventure, and I went from there, and it took me 5 years to learn how to write fiction. But that became Mally the Maker and the Queen and the Quilt. And so this is a quilt fiction or quilt fantasy series. First book came out last year. Because of the Goddess Quilt book, I pushed back the next book in this series until next year. But basically tells the story of Mally the Maker. She goes into a magical world called Quilst. And everyone thinks I'm misspelling the word quilts because it's Quilst, but it's not misspelled. That's the name of the world. And in this world, she makes friends. Everything made out of fabric can come to life. So she has a Miss Bunny doll, and she brings Miss Bunny in with her, and Miss Bunny comes to life. And also quilt blocks. So if you make a bear's claw block and you bring it into Quilst, it will become a real bear.
Wow.
And so that becomes a plot point within the book. Of course, there's an evil bad guy that's out to destroy everything. Alex had this amazing adventure, and then it's rolled off. So that was the first book. I then designed a Miss Bunny doll. And the kind of the background of Miss Bunny is this was a real doll that I grew up with, and I lost her. And I kind of wrote that in the book, was that sense of devastation and loss of losing that special stuffed animal. It is actually heartbreak. And I put that in the book, and that really was healing to me. And then to be able to recreate my Miss Bunny doll as close as I could from memory into a real doll has been amazing. And then now I get to see Miss Bunnies. I've turned it into a pattern, and now I'm seeing Miss Bunnies being made all over again. And that's just, it's amazing. It's really, really
Don't
cool.
you love that? Oh my gosh, it's so inspiring. Just from what you've talked about on this, because you have shared a lot, and I feel like this is amazing how you do this too, that you're able to share updates and progress as you're in it. Like you're in the process. You don't
Yeah.
wait until the end till you're done, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is what I have. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And
Not everybody can do that.
well, there's a lot in the quilting world, there's a lot of secret sewing.
Yes.
If you work with another company, then there's secrets. There's like, oh, well, we got to wait for this to come out until June, or we've got to wait for this to come out until Christmas. And I hate that. It's impossible for me, because I have that, energy and excitement about something while I'm in it. And it's really hard to generate and manufacture that at the end. And I'm so excited. Well, you know what? That was 6 months ago, and I've largely forgotten that project. To be completely honest, that's how my energy works. It doesn't work for me to work so hard on something 18 months. This is why fabric design doesn't work for me. It's super hard to work on something and then not see it again for 18 months. And it's like, oh, there's that thing that I designed 18 months ago, and I guess I still like it. I don't know.
Oh, that's so 2018.
It's like, I have a hard time with that. I really do. So when I'm sharing, it's like, this is what I'm working on this week. I don't do secret sewing. When I have a company that I'm working with, I kind of I design it and I send it off, and I don't even mention it in the podcast. It's not even a thing. And then when when something happens, or, something comes out, then it's like, okay, now I need to make something new with that thing that I can be excited about, that I can bring that energy into, and then that works. But yeah, fabric design was one of those things that I tried it out, I gave it a good go, and I decided that's not for me for that reason. It's just too far out. Now, that being said, I'm working now with print on demand fabrics, where I can upload and it's ready to go, and there's no wait time, So that is working much better for how I work in my creative flow than the more traditional fabric design series and stuff like that.
But why else that you can do this successfully is that you're developing this is your control thing, but it's under your brand. You're controlling it, and you don't have to fabric design, these designers have to work with these fabric companies, and they're under their umbrella. So I mean, there's a lot more restrictions and rules.
Yeah, and in my opinion, a lot less money to be made. I mean, this is my judgment. Now, could I sell as much? Let's say the last thing I just designed for Spoonflower was a Miss Bunny panel. Okay, so you can make Miss Bunny, you can cut her out and sew her together completely from a panel. You don't even need a pattern. I sell so much more of that if it was put out through a major fabric company? Absolutely. But I'm going to be making 10 cents a yard on that fabric. That's kind of average. When I upload that to Spoonflower, I mean, sure, it's more expensive per yard. It's like 17, 18 bucks a yard on the retail end, but I'm making $1.25 per yard. So my per yard amount is so much more. I get to advertise that. I get to put that out there and say, hey guys, then it's based on how much I'm willing to promote it.
Right. And it's yours.
It's mine.
It's your design.
And no one's going to tell me, hey, you can't, we're out and we can't sell it anymore. No one's going to tell me that it's out of
Right.
And that's the main thing. I can thank my father-in-law and my husband for really teaching me about the traditional publishing market. They were writers, and they had experience with having books come out and then go out of print. And it's devastating, because you have this book, you have this body of work, you've got, the story that you've told, it's important to you. And here's this publisher who's basically looking at their balance sheet going, we're not going to print it again. And it's frustrating, because there's that time that you put into it, and it's now worthless. I mean, you got as much as you could make out of it, and then that's it. But on the internet, especially these days, it does not take into account the long tail, which means a pattern, just for an example, I came out with a pattern in 2014, okay? That's building blocks. Super successful pattern. It's still selling today. If I had come out with that as a book and gone through a major publisher, number one, it would have taken double the length of time to come out, so it wouldn't have hit the timing that I needed. And then
Right.
number two, at some point, they would have said, hey, the publisher might have even gone out of business by this point. I mean, that length of time, AQS went out of business. And I think, what is it, F&W Media just filed for bankruptcy.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So, in that length of time, the publisher might not even exist anymore. And if they did, then what if they had said, hey, we don't want to publish anymore, or we don't want to do another print run of this? Then that pattern would no longer be available, which means I would no longer be making money off of it. Right. So retaining control, yes, it's more work. Yes, it's absolutely, I can tell you, there are days that I'm like, this is driving me nuts. And it does make me angry because it's like, I am wearing too many hats. And that's when I really have to carve out and go, this is prioritized. I'm not doing this anymore. I need, and I'll just say, Josh, you need to do this, this, and this. And, divide it all up, divide and conquer, and I get really I become the leader of the business. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's what I'm supposed to do. I'm the business owner, but there are times it's frustrating. But in the end, after every single project is done, I look at it and I go, I'm so glad that I do what I do because I have so much more control. I'm planning large print for this goddess book, and large print basically doesn't exist in the quilting world because it's expensive. And this book is probably going to cost double the price because it's going to be double the pages.
Is it going to be like a coffee table book then?
No, I probably won't change the print, the overall size. It'll just be thicker.
Oh, okay.
It'll just be thicker. It might end up having to be hardback. I don't know, but it will be large print. I can do audiobook.
Yeah.
I can do any kind of ebook in the world, and audio is definitely something I'm getting into with Mally the Maker too. And these are things that if I didn't retain rights, I wouldn't be able to necessarily do, or I wouldn't be able to control how it was being done. Yes. So yeah, I'm absolutely kind of a go get it, do it yourself, do self-publishing.
I love it. You are so inspiring to me, and I just learned so much. And I love that you just, like you said earlier, you just put it all out there. You're not just presenting this pretty wrapped up package of like, I'm so great and I accomplished all this stuff with 0 mistakes.
Oh my gosh.
It's wonderful. It's so wonderful. And it's got to be rewarding to have, like you're talking about all the headache, and it is a lot of work. And sometimes I feel like that too, just being myself, and like I'm doing everything.
Yeah.
And it takes longer. Yeah. But in the end, once you accomplish your goal and you accomplish it, it is so fulfilling and rewarding, and you're proud of yourself. So
and that's so too. It's the knowledge that, and maybe this is kind of a little bit more of my control freaky nature, is the knowledge that it can't be taken away from me. Just for an example, I can take my walking foot book and I need to do an update on that book and kind of change some diagrams. I have the power to do that. And versus, a traditional publisher probably wouldn't. And, so I have the power and the control, and I love that. And it's not perfect. There are bad days. That is the case of every job, of every business. But would I rather, the thing I always come back to is, would I rather be doing anything else? And the answer is no. I would not survive as an employee of somebody else's business, because I would drive the business owner crazy. It would be like, so are you going to change this and this and this and this? And that's not perfect. I would be that nitpicky person that drives you crazy. Right. So I have got to run the ship and steer the ship and stuff. But I have had to work the most on delegating. Because I'm a control freak, that has been the hardest part of the process for me, is delegating, and to be able to hand the videos, especially off to my husband, and say, I need this edited today, and to let him do it and to not nitpick and stuff. It's very hard. Like Dad, like I've even started saying, I need this pattern, can you design this? And my dad has a design background from not anything to do with fabric, with metal work and being a tool and die maker, but he knows how to measure and he knows how to cut and he can do it. So he designed a monkey wrench quilt that we're working on right now, and we've been working on it for 2 weeks. I said, Dad, I'm sick of that monkey wrench quilt and I haven't piecing it. So he designed it and he's piecing it right now, and then I'm going to do the videos on quilting it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
That's
delegation is the
awesome.
key. And the thing I think is most important is giving credit to these people that help me do this,
Yes.
because I absolutely could not be doing this alone. I mean, I'm at a point I can absolutely say I could not pack orders and check email and do Josh's job and do Dad's job and do what I'm doing. I would not have the output. Like what you
Hmm.
see coming out every week is thanks to three people behind the scenes working every day, you know?
Yeah, it's so important because you would certainly burn out. Totally.
Yeah. Well, it just
Yeah.
wouldn't be possible. I could come out with one
It
video.
wouldn't be possible. Right.
Yeah. The side of it that's hard is the fear side of it, of putting a lot of time and a lot of energy into something that might not sell. And that is in
Hmm.
every single product. That's in my goddess book. Even though I have a lot of hope and ambition that this is going to be successful, the truth of the matter is there is absolutely no guarantees in life in anything. I have put months and months of work into products that have not panned out. Not everything I've ever touched has worked. You know,
Hmm.
I have had bad years, whole years that have been really, really hard, and we've had to eat a lot of red beans and rice. It's not all perfect and it's not always easy. And that fear side of it is the hardest part, of just saying, I trust myself. I'm going to try this. It might be weird. It might be different. It might be too pink. I don't know, but let's just try it.
Hmm.
And then with every single project I make, I learn something new. And
Hmm.
that's the only way I can improve.
Right. And the difference is, and this is where, I need to push myself more, is that, your goddess book may never have happened or come out if you hadn't have tried all this other stuff and failed, and you're to the point now where you're willing to take the risk,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
and it drives you forward. I think it propels you.
yeah.
And I just have to remember that for myself too, is to, I'm constantly fighting that perfectionism thing. So,
Yeah.
uh,
And no one doesn't buy your pattern because of one misstitched. You know,
right.
that's not the reason why somebody doesn't buy a pattern or something like that. They
Hmm.
don't buy a pattern because it costs too much or they don't like the quilt on the cover. You know,
Right.
that's the reason why. And yes, you're absolutely right. I feel like for years I've done the thing that I thought would sell. And a lot of that was spending a lot of time on quilt-alongs. And I don't regret it, not a bit. But I've reached a point with quilt-alongs where I've done a certain style and a certain thing so many times. And it's great fun. It's awesome. We learn a lot, but I've done it to death and it's time to
Hmm.
change. And so
Hmm.
next year I'm not doing a quilt along. Next year I'm just focusing in on books and just being a good publisher, being a good author. I'm
Hmm.
planning more Mally books. I want to do more audio. I want to
Good.
large print, and
Hmm.
I'm going to become a better writer, a better publisher, and more speed in that area. And then shifting away from doing this kind of weekly or monthly big, huge, giant quilt along. And the main reason was it was taking so much time. I mean, I could write 3 books in the amount of time it took me to design and create the quilt along I'm sharing right now. I mean, it's an awesome quilt along, and I hope you guys will come
Yeah.
and join in the fun. It's a friendship quilt along, and you can make a twin throw, queen, king, or throw size quilt with this quilt along. It's great, but I cannot express just how much work this was.
Yes.
And it's really hard to be at this stage. This is kind of the slow down stage, and it happens every year. I'm used to it, but it's a slow
Hmm.
down stage of this quilt along where people kind of drop out. It's okay. I'm used to it by this point, but I've reached a point where I can say I don't want to do this anymore.
Hmm.
I loved it. It was great. It really taught a lot of people about quilting, and that's
Hmm.
awesome. I've shared basically a different quilt along every year since 2012. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's been a long time doing this. And I've reached a point where I can say, I've been there, I've done that. It's time to do something different. And that something different is becoming a better writer and publisher.
Hmm. Absolutely. And then we're just in the tail end here, and we're talking about the other parts of your business. And another thing that you're doing is your Quilt Friends Club, and that is subscription based, right?
Yes, yes. So we did Facebook groups for years, and that was largely to support the quilt along. And then Facebook got too nasty. It really
Yeah.
did. It just became a toxic cesspool. And I reached a point where I was done with it. And so we shut down our Facebook groups. And then I took a lot of time off of that. And I was not planning on doing anything else. I really, really wasn't. But a lot of people really wanted that interaction. They really wanted a place to share photos. They really wanted a place that they could chat with me. And or send me a text message easily or something like that. And then, a place to make friends. And so it took a long time. I finally found a great platform that's Mighty Network, and was able to build my own site, and that's quiltfriends.club. And then you can set the membership, and the membership is either $2.99 a month or $24.99 a year. So you get a really good discount whenever you go for the year-long subscription. And charging money is it's a entry fee. It's basically like, hey, you got to pay to enter, which means if you want to pay to enter, you've got to be nice. And you have no idea how little, like, basically none. We've not had a single bit of negativity in this group. We've never had to, delete a post. Where I was deleting posts in the Facebook group, I was deleting upwards of 5 a day. It was that ridiculous. And it was, it was just stuff that was just like, guys, this is ridiculous. We're a quilting group, this stuff shouldn't even be coming up. The stuff, and two, people were ripping off my patterns within the group too. I mean, it was just insulting. It was downright insulting. And I don't get any of that in the Quilting Friends Club. So, and then I do a special video just for that group. It's called How Do I Quilt This? And so basically members can upload 1 photo a month to a specific topic area. And then once a month, I take all of those photos that have been uploaded and I print them out, and I share 3 different quilting design ideas. So, the easy part is the piecing, following a pattern, making the quilt top. The hard part is figuring out, okay, how do we quilt that in a creative way? And I'm taking into account things like the type of sewing machine that you're using, how much, whether it's a long arm or, on a frame, or it's a home sewing machine on a table. I'm taking that into account because you can do certain things really easily on a home machine. You can't do it on a long arm, and vice versa. There's just differences there. I'm also taking into account, if someone says, oh, I only want straight line quilting, then I specifically design straight line quilting designs. So I'm taking what my group members are needing, and then it's making me a better designer, because then I'm getting all that, all these different amazing quilts that I get to play with, and I don't have to piece them. I don't have to design them. I don't have to piece them. I get to play with that and then come up with these 3 different quilting design ideas. So it's a push for me, it's a push for them, and everybody seems to be really enjoying it. And we have, at the time of this recording, we have 4 up, and they are now pushing 2 hours a piece. Every new video I'm coming out with for that series they're about 2 hours long, because I'm getting so many quilts.
Oh, wow. Now, have you had people post after you've done How Do I Quilt This and given them the 3 options? Have they done one of those options and posted the completion?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Sometimes they take my advice, and then sometimes they completely scrap it. And, sometimes my idea might lead to something totally different. It's all good. Basically it's all good. And I don't, I'm always just kind of like, here's some options. And I'm always saying, this is just a starting line. This is just what came into my head. And I always am talking about how some days I'm feeling like circles, some days I'm feeling like feathers. You kind of have to just let your design inspiration flow. And I don't realize that when I'm starting until about the 3rd or 4th quilt that I'm working on. And they're like, oh, wow, guys, I'm hitting the circles today. And every single quilt has lots of circles in it. And I don't know why, it's just how it's happening. And I just flow with it. I just go with it, and it works.
Right. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. The whole Facebook thing group, I just know, like, I did not want to start one for Make and Decorate, but I want somewhere for people to go. So you've been pretty inspiring with that as well. I mean, you're definitely a maverick. I love that you just find solutions for whatever you need.
Well, you kind of have to. This is your sole source of income. This is what supports my family. This is, what's going to put my son through college. This is what pays for all of my awesome quilting gear and fabric too. So yeah, I've got to keep it afloat. I got to keep the lights on. And, for that reason, that kind of is a stressor sometimes. Sometimes it's too much pressure, and it's a constant kind of battle between, okay, how can I kind of take that pressure off and still have fun? And the thing I love about the Mighty Network, in the Quilting Friends Club, is that I can actually say, like, guys, this keeps the podcast going. When I advertise, I predominantly advertise the club through the podcast. And I can say, hey guys, help support this podcast so it continues, so my free tutorials continue. And I think people are connecting that really easily, and that is absolutely helping support us. It's about, right now, what we're making is about the electricity bill. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's something, and it helps offset the cost that I have going with the podcast, because the podcast is harder to create. It takes the greatest amount of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can shoot out a tutorial on free motion quilting, and I don't have to worry about the audio as much. I don't have to worry about having 3 different things to record it and stuff like that. That podcast is so much more effort every single week, but it's so much more rewarding. So for that, that's the reason why I do it, and I'm going to stick with it, you know. And we just hit, I think the one that we just recorded with you was episode 106. So yeah, I'm doing it anytime soon. I really love it.
Oh, cool. That's so awesome. And then you've got an upcoming event in June. Quilt Fantastic Quilting Seminar.
Yes.
And that's in, go ahead, talk about that.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. And it's in Kingsport, Tennessee. And Bob Bolton is a sewing machine dealer. He runs the Sewing and Long Arm Center in Kingsport, Tennessee. And we met at VDTA. That's a Sewing Machine and Vacuum Trade Association show. And so we met last year, and he came up to me. I was at the Grace booth, and he was, you know, we just started to chat. And he was like, I'm going to open another shop, and I'd love to have you come and do an event. And we just hit it off. And then he sent me an email a couple months ago and said, hey, do you want to do this? And, you know, let's actually make this a big thing. Let's do a conference center. Let's do the whole 9 yards. So I went up to Kingsport, and we sat down and had a chat. It's only about 2.5 hours away from me, which is quite reasonable. I have never done anything like this before, but Bob has. So it's awesome to be able to partner with him with this. And we're going to have a great time. The morning session is going to be long arm quilting. We're going to have a continuum frame and a Grace Cunique 15R setup. So I'm going to do demoing and really focus in on ruler quilting, and then quilting designs for different styles of quilts. So if you want to finish something quick, if you want to finish something with more time and more attention to the piecing, you know, kind of looking at the quilt and looking at the purpose of the quilt and planning your quilting design accordingly. So just basically kind of pulling from that, how do I quilt this series that I'm sharing on the club, and really sharing a lot of that information that I've learned in the seminar. And so the morning sessions for long arms and the afternoon sessions for home sewing machine, we're going to have a whole machine set up on the new Q-Zone frame. Talk through that, and basically kind of the same information shared in both, but you can attend both and learn a lot about both styles of machines. And I'll have books and rulers, and I'm going to bring lots of goddess quilts to that show. So it's going to be a great opportunity. And I'm going to sign, of course, sign books and stuff. So it'll be a great opportunity just to meet a lot of people in person. And I'm excited about it because I need this kind of thing. You know, I can get stuck into a rut of kind of being home and alone and my antisocial introverted self, and having this grand push to break everything out and get out of my comfort zone and be in front of people. I'm really excited about that. And I don't know if this will be something that we do more often, like a regular thing, but I'm open to that, because to me, with how the internet has gone, and I've been doing this for 10 years now, I can say, you know, the internet has definitely changed since I started sharing videos. And I'm at the point now, and my son is older now too, that I can say, you know, an event once or twice a year is something we can do together as a family and have a really great time with. And it also shakes us out of our routine, which is awesome. And then if it's really successful for our business too, then that takes the pressure off of everything else. Because like, wow, okay, well, I don't have to run as many sales. I don't have to just obsess about the success of this product or that product or the other thing. I can really just focus on that event, making that event as successful as it can be. Mm-hmm. It's a different.
Yeah, I wish I could go to that. I wish also that they would video that, and even if they sell it, I mean,
that's an idea.
That would be so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Very nice.
I'll mention that to Bob. We are going to have audiovisual going because I'm going to be demoing, of course, and I've already said, let's have a camera so that way we can shoot and have it on a big screen. So I'm going to bring cameras, so we'll see if we can make that happen. And I think having a DVD or, an online video come out of that would be really cool.
Yeah. And even if they just did, an online YouTube with just highlights from it. I mean, that would even be cool too.
Exactly.
So I would love that. All right. Oh my gosh. I think that's it. I mean, I could continue talking to you for like years, but All good things have to come to an end.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really had a great time.
Thank you for coming on the show. I just really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm going to have you come back. Like when your goddess book comes out, maybe, or something.
That would be awesome. That would be
great.
Yeah.
Really great. Okay, well, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Make and Decorate podcast. You can find the show notes and the podcast episodes on my website at stephaniesochadesign.com. And I appreciate any ratings, reviews, and comments that you would like to post, and give me feedback on Instagram or wherever you are at. Okay, bye.